That's why. Hey, how's it going, Powwow Times? People out there in internet land. Today we got another cool live stream that we're gonna do. We got a really cool guest that we're gonna bring out and talk to you a little bit about, being indigenous, thinking indigenous, and living an indigenous way. But first of all, we like to just say hello to everybody, and hopefully everybody's doing good. Let everybody kind of roll in. We got people, and you guys kind of know the drill. When we'd like to give you guys a shout out. So let us know where you're watching in from, so we could give you a little bit of shout out so we know exactly where you are, and say hello to you guys. It's a nice, beautiful Thursday. Some people are out there golfing. Some people are birthday. I just want to say also happy birthday to uh, my mother-in-law, Carol Moccasin, and from Soto First Nations. Happy birthday to you. Also, happy birthday to my brother Marcus Patagan. Hopefully, everybody's doing good out there. Give us a little bit of shout out where you're watching in from so we could shout you out. And we got Edmonton, Alberta in the house. We got Houston, Texas. Derek Peters says hello. How's it
Hello,
going?
Derek.
So it's so good to see you guys. Throw in your comments. Go ahead, Jao.
All the way from Acadia, California. Cookie,
Gookie,
Salt Lake City, Utah.
Thunderhawk.
Happy birthday to your family.
Oh,
Thank
that's
you.
yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All the way from Edmonton, Creelan Desiree.
Wisconsinite Ho Chunk Donovan Littlechild. What is up? Omaha, Nebraska in the house.
Michigan, West Michigan. Pound Maker Cree Nation.
This is
All
a
the way
cool,
from South Texas.
cool little roll call. Deanna Spidel from Whitecap. It's awesome to have you. Awesome. Comfort, Texas. Sounds very
Ooh,
comfortable.
Oklahoma up in the
So
house.
now that we got people rolling in, we're gonna give away a free CD on this podcast, live podcast. It's a high noon CD, still in the plastic. It's brand new. We want to mail it out to you guys, to a lucky winner on this podcast. To enter this, all you got to do is send some stars. So at any amount you want to send some stars to Powwow Times, we're gonna enter you in to win this high noon CD. So thanks for all the support for everybody out there. Hello to everybody. Fort McDowell, how are you? So we got people from all over the world kind of tuning in. Kaneo Kanipawit, we just had you. That Cree name translates to the man looking at four directions, I believe, right? So good to have you, brother, in the house. So we have our special guest today. It's my uncle of mine, Mr. Tommy Christian, world champion dancer and MC, knowledge keeper, elder. If you ever heard him on the mic, he's always saying some really good words, and we kind of wanted people to um, to to bring him out and bring him to our crowd. He's a guy that I look up to. I don't know if he knows, but he's kind of like a secret role model to me. That I always listen to him when he's speaking, and I try and internalize everything that he's saying. So it's gonna be a good show today, guys. We're gonna bring him out, Mr. Tommy Christian, and kind of get this stream going in a good way. So, how's it going, Tommy? How are you doing?
Hey, good evening. Daya hipi mitaki epi ushia ke mitaki epi ekchewi chasha mielo. Ambe tukile mi chante ta o aglake na hana pe chuza pelo. Ho he chaje mi ta wamnisha ge doba ima chiape. Hoka he wopi lai tanka na ha ushia ke na ha omakia na ha agnagupta. Hey, chetualo. Good evening there, Toshka. Good to see
Mm-hmm.
you. Good to see your face here. I just got back from the golf course. Of course, as old as I am, and I'm retired, so I hang out at the golf course lots. And today was tough enough to wear pink. I was
Yeah.
so tough. I had to wear two pink shirts.
You're looking good. You're looking good. So, what's been
Oh,
keeping you busy during this quarantine time? Has anything changed for you? Are you kind of a homebody, or is it kind of a whole big change for you?
no, no, well, it's not necessarily a change, especially in Indian country. Right on the reservation, we have very limited resources, so we kind of entertain ourselves in our own way. Anyway, a lot of the non-Indian people, they say, "Oh, change of life. They're changing our ways," and to us, it's that third week of the month, eh? We got no
Mm-hmm.
money, so we can't go nowhere. So we got to stay home. We got to kind of ration out our meals till the first, till we got some cash. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like that. So not too much change for us. We're still going. I'm going sundances and sweat lodges, and we're gonna have a kettle dance here next weekend as well. And then we're gonna have our college graduation, and so life is continuing to go on. But we're being very prudent in the manner in which we socialize, though, eh? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's something to be responsible about. And of course, as Indian people, we're kind of like that anyway. Out of respect for one another, we don't invade people's space, and just kind of that's our way of life. We're not boisterous, we're not bold. We just kind of very what we call in our language ekchewichasha. We're just Indians.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Kind of.
So can I maybe get you to introduce, I know you spoke a little in your language, but maybe introduce yourself to our people who might not know who you are, where you come from, and a little bit of your backstory.
Well, sure, sure. You know, I was born and raised in Poplar, Montana. My name is Tommy Christian. That's what the white people call me. And the Indian people know me as Wamnishage. That translates into eagle claw. But they also refer to me as four. I carry two names, one a Nakona name and a Dakota name. And then let's see, I was on the tribal council. I was one of the tribal leaders here for the Fort Peck, Assiniboine Sioux tribes for 18 years. I also world champion dancer. 1996, I took the world champion in Northern Traditional in Skimitzen way back in the day. And other than that, I just kind of go around, help people out however it can be. And I get invited to a few gatherings, this celebration of life that they call Powwow. I go out and help people out and do stuff like that. And other than that, that's who I am. But I'm just like a Kchewi Chasha, I just enjoy my way of life. I enjoy participating, involving myself, living like a Dakota, Nakona, and Lakota Indian. I'm all three. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
DNL. And, and I also like people to understand that because it represents dialects, eh? So when a Dakota tells these girls they love them, they say, I dove you. When Nakonas say that, they say, I love you. But me, I'm Lakota, so I say, I love you. That's an old one.
That's awesome.
Just a little joke there to help people understand that we're alive and well. We still speak our language. We still conduct ourselves in a respectful way as we learn how to become that wichasha or that wia that becomes responsible not only for themselves but for the sake of their family, their tribe, and indigenous people all over the world. And so we kind of understand the importance of natural law, and we continue to live by that. And it's really important that people come to understand, like, nephew, when I speak like this, it sounds like I'm perpetuating pan-Indianism, but I'm not. What I'm really trying to promote is natural law. And that doesn't mean that we're all the same. And that's one of the topics I wanted to speak tonight about is what I always share with people is, as it relates to our culture, is this diversity and this uniqueness should become an enhancement and enrichment for the sake of the growth of our children. And our children, of course, represent our future. And so, in that, when we look inwardly and accept that responsibility of being a human being, then we can look forward to developing our character based on exercising these virtues that we're taught will strengthen us as we continue to walk. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm trying to promote or say we're all the same, because we're not. The diversity is represented in the tribes that we represent, and the uniqueness is also represented by the language we speak and the ceremonies that we maintain. And so it's really important that people understand that, because Indians aren't the same by no means, and they're always trying to help others in a good way. They're always supporting one another, and you can see that with some of the action that currently took place down in Fort Yates, North Dakota, when they had that no DAPL. People didn't understand the importance of protecting our first medicine. And we believe our first medicine is water. And they couldn't relate to that. They couldn't understand that. And they thought they were just going to let them go through. And then they realized that that was something that was very serious to us, because without water, we definitely die as human beings. And then, of course, if one little insect dies, the whole insects die. One worm and all the worms died, the earth would die. If one tree, the old trees that died, then the whole earth would die. But if human beings died, the earth, our mother earth, would flourish. We need to think about little concepts like that, little generalizations about how we affect what we depend on, our mother earth. And of course, our first medicine is water, and how we need to look after that, how we need to care. And again, a lot of times we take it for granted because all we got to do is go to the faucet and turn it on, there's water. Well, they don't realize that water's got to come from somewhere. And it's coming from our mother earth. It's coming from the Wakia Oyate, the thunderbirds, as they replenish the mother earth with water and all that good stuff. But that also is due, that respect that we're taught to live by. That's why we have ceremony. We have a special attachment and a connection with our spirit world to help us maintain that humbleness so that we can continue to walk this earth in a good way, as this earth was left to us in a good way. Well, we'd like to leave it to our future, our children, in a good way as well. So it's something that when we live so fast and we try to keep up with the bills and the car payments and the house payments and stuff like that, sometimes we forget about that. But I'm just here to continue to understand that there are lots and lots of people on the res that still maintain that. And guess what? It's young people. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why I agreed, my nephew, is to come on to your show, because you're utilizing some tools as you relate to this avenue of approach to kind of share this diversity that exists out there, but yet helping us maintain that dignity and honor as it relates to keeping that integrity of who we are as a people. And so I think it's really important, and I can understand when you utilize this IT perspective that it needs to be done in a more contemporary time. Long ago, we did a lot of our teachings based on abstract learning, experiential teachings, and of course, white people, they're linear learners, and so they learn by reading, writing, and arithmetic. But we need to kind of take that a step forward, because our world views have all grown. Before, our worldview used to be just down by the river, and of course our little towns, and then it expanded to our reservations, and then because of IT, it expanded to the whole universe. And so as we do these things, and you hear our old people when they pray, they always pray for Wo la chota makasi tomani. And what that translates into is peace all over the universe. And so that's our understanding of these teachings that will help us to become stronger and utilize like these contemporary ways to convey such a beautiful message, because we are very beautiful people. A lot of people misunderstand us. They mock us. They make us mascots. All these things, and that's not very respectful. But the old people always say, "Well, that's them. Let them do that." We don't argue. We don't fight. We don't go out, and we're not savages and scalp people and kill people like that, because we have a respect for the human being, and try to understand the diversity that they represent. And so, because the white people, are non-Indian relatives, they live by a doctrine that states stuff like they feel they have dominion over animals. We don't. We feel we're the same. We're the same as them, and this spiritual energy, which we refer to as Wachatancha, is looks at us all the same. And so, you know, a lot of people don't understand the importance of all of us Indians, even the old people sitting on the floor or sitting on the ground, because we're representing that commonness, that Indianness of who and what we are. And I'll kind of convey that a little bit more in this discussion, but I just don't want to confuse anybody thinking that we're all the same, because that's not being respectful towards that diversity, that uniqueness of what we're trying to promote as it relates to utilizing these tools that are available to us now, such as this informational technology. Because
Hmm.
then, on a press of a button, our worldview becomes just that, a world view. Eh? Is that cool or what?
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
absolutely cool. That's good. And I like how you kind of made it okay for us on our mission that we are
Yeah.
trying to reach people through new technologies, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't know if this is a right thing to do because we're getting some knowledge from people and it's not maybe the way we are brought up to do it, right? To I
Yes.
think when we were at a powwow, we were sitting down and I gave you tobacco and I we interviewed you about what powwow was and the histories of powwow. And you were talking about how the young people are not sitting down with elders anymore, right? That now we have
Yeah.
to reach them kind of a new way. And
Yeah.
just to hear you say that it was okay to do it gave us a push to like, okay, let's keep doing this, which is awesome. You spoke about natural law. Can you explain that to if people don't understand what natural law means?
Well, it's an experience of living and looking at oneself, looking inwardly and taking the responsibility of living as a human being, and not looking away from yourself and blaming others. And in our language, we always say, "Mitaku epi brehichiapo," and what that means is, my relative, make yourself strong. We don't mean to make yourself strong in your muscles or anything, but more so in your spiritual way of life. You make yourself strong by exercising all of these virtues, such as generosity, compassion, loving, caring, sharing, um, uh, you know, all these things that we live by. And so our pursuit is not so much of materialism or capitalism, it's more of a way of making our self strong in preparation to go and be with our relatives that are already on the other side. And so in our language, we say, nak e nulawa un, and that means to make yourself ready for anything. And when they say it to you in a spiritual way, it means make yourself ready for this mystery of death. And so in natural law, you look inwardly because you have a purpose and you have a dedication in life, and it's up to you to become strong enough and to understand your purpose and dedication and walk what we refer to as this red road and make good tracks on with that development of the character that you have, and so that those that are following you will be able to know where you're going on this red road. And so it's mostly for our young people. We strengthen ourselves to represent, again, not only ourselves, but our family and our tribes and indigenous people all over. But at the same time, that's not an easy job to do, especially in a time where life is so fast. And so when we live culturally or under this value system of natural law, we need to slow down. My father used to tell me, my son, when you come over here, you go slow. He said, it's if you go fast, it's like taking your grandfather by the hand and running with him. And that's very disrespectful. So you can keep up and do a good job with the white people and get good things, have a nice car, have a nice house, pay your bills, be responsible, be strong in that way, but don't ever forget where you came from. Don't forget us. That's what they taught us. And through that strengthening, under this natural law, we come to understand the importance of looking inwardly. And I always try to help people understand the importance of Indian people are unique in the fact that they heal from the inside out. From where our heart is. Our heart is protected. We heal from the inside out, whereas non-Indian people heal from the outside in. And once we understand that, then we start gaining this understanding as it relates to what is it going to take to overcome, I guess you could call it colonialism, eh? Because the behavior we currently have is a learned behavior from a people that live by a doctrine that believe they have dominion over animals, and you should hit your children, spare the rod, lose the child, so to speak, kind of like that, and just a value system that is not really natural. It's more dogmatic. It's more you have to do this, you have to do that, or else you're going to hell. But you see, our belief is this wakantanka, this spiritual energy, that's big spiritual energy that most white people refer to as heaven, is where we're preparing to go, because we believe that all of our relatives are over there. And if none of my relatives are over there, that wouldn't be my heaven, because that's why I live the way I live, is because I want to prepare to go spend eternity with my relatives that have gone before me. So we, in our ceremonies, we feed them, we acknowledge them, we ask them for guidance, assistance. We maintain that connection based on our ability to understand in a spiritual way some of this guidance and direction that has been passed down through our older people, the Winuk Chalapi and the Wichak Chalapi, and those that carry that wisdom that we hold dear to our hearts. We want to make sure that we try to follow natural law in the manner in which it was intended, not to make ourselves better or not to become exclusive, but to be very inclusive in this Changleshka, the circle of life, for the sake of everyone. And in that inclusive manner, we always refer to human beings as huhu nupa. And what that means in our language is the two-legged. Then we understand there's the four-legged, the huhu dopa, the chobahu oyategi, the winged ones, the ichaga oyategi, the things that grow out of the ground. We also call the dagushkanshka oyategi, the insects. We include them. All of God's creation, whatever that higher power is that created all this, we try to understand what are little places in that circle of life, and it's inclusive of all things, and everybody has a purpose and a dedication. So we go out and we fast, we sit on the hill, we don't eat or drink water for 4 days and 4 nights, and crying, they call it hamble chea, and so that means you cry all night for a vision, so that you'll understand as you look inwardly what your purpose and dedication is. But there takes a preparation for that to occur. You just can't do it tomorrow. You got to prepare for that. You got to be prepared holistically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically. You got to prepare for that. So it's not something that you just, oh, I want to be Indian today and go and fast tomorrow. You got to be prepared for that. So it's a concept that natural law helps us understand. We're inclusive in everything that this higher power has created, and I refer to that as Wakantanka, which I translate into this spirit, this big spiritual energy. So it's not so much a god per se, but it's an energy. It's a spiritual energy that is up there, and a lot of times uh, our language has been contaminated. Sometimes you'll hear people speak when they pray, Ate makpia ekta, my dad that's in the sky, hey? Because that's Christianized reference to this higher power, whereas I refer to this higher power as wanchantancha, this spiritual energy that's so big, where we all are going to end up in. And because we have no concept of hell, based on the fact that this energy, the spiritual energy, is the epitome of redemption, then that's where we're preparing to go. Because inevitably, everybody goes there. That's our belief under natural law. It's kind of like those concepts, and that's kind of what I wanted to convey, so that people don't get confused. I don't talk against Christianity, but I will speak to the differences that exist out of respect, and so that people in their manner in which they choose to live can understand that we say "Wowi chaki ob omani." That means I walk with the truth, eh? And even when we speak our language, when we speak it, there's no sarcasm in the language which we speak. It's always spoken in a respectful way. And so what you mean is what you say, and what you say is what you mean. So it's kind of like that. For the sake of natural law and for the sake of preparation under Nak E Nulawa'u, you're prepared for anything. And then my young relatives ask me, well, how do you prepare for death? I say, you be good to everything and everybody as well as you can. In other words, good could be transferred with respect, eh? And so that's natural law, kind of in a nutshell, but it involves a whole lot of things out there. Just understanding our little place in this life to help us realize that there was a purpose and there was a meaning for us even before we were born, before we came to this earth, that this natural energy had in store for us. But it doesn't dominate us. It affords us an opportunity of critical thought. It affords us an opportunity to be intuitive in the manner in which we go forward, but we're always going forward in a respectful way. We don't want to overpower, overcome anybody. That's why I always address the fact that we're not savages, we're not heathens, we're not pagans. We are human beings, eh? And it's kind of like that, my boy. I hope that made sense.
No, absolutely. That was awesome. A lot of good comments coming in, and a lot of love coming in from the comment section. And one thing that really hit me about kind of some of your teachings was your philosophy of how we heal from the inside out. You did a
Oh,
interview with powwows.com. I read that, and how you were talking about a little bit about that concept, right? How does, because we have generational trauma and blood memory trauma that's passed down through all the systems that we went through, residential schools and all the wars we've been through with the governments and treaties and all that. How does one start beginning to heal from the inside out? Was that what you were saying about fasting 4 days and going to ceremonies? How does one kind of begin that journey?
well, nephew. Again, that's why I don't want to create this pan Indianism amongst us, because each and every one of us, in our own tribal way, we have our own way of addressing and realizing that strength from within, eh? And it's
Mm-hmm.
up to them. Their protocol that affords them an opportunity to gain that strength is up to like on the West Coast. I went out there to a feast one time, and I didn't eat all day because I said, "Oh, okay, I'm going to get some good soup and all that good stuff, some good beef." I went to their ceremony. I ate a whole bunch of roots and fish. But and I was still hungry afterwards, so I had to go to Wendy's and get a greasy hamburger. But but that was their way, and oh, it was such a beautiful ceremony. They called it the Longhouse. That was a ceremony that I attended, and but they have their own way of doing things under protocol. It's not dogmatic because it's not something you have to do. It's something you would like to do and you're willing to do for the sake of gaining this strength. And it affords you an opportunity to develop an avenue of approach as it relates to some of the realities that we're dealing with, eh? Some of the oppression that we have to contend with. And you speak about historical trauma and some of the things that learned behavior helped us with. And I'm a strong believer in genetic memory, eh? And because I do think it's in our bloodline, I do think we carry those things. But that strengthening of oneself from the inside out, it affords us an opportunity to really exercise the giving, the addressing generosity, the caring, the sharing, the loving of one another in such a beautiful way. And I try to help people understand that uh, I don't argue about Christianity, but I help them try to understand that if Jesus was here today and he walked on the North American continent, he'd probably hang around Indians because he had so much in common with Indian people. Because I truly, strongly believe under this Wancha the spiritual energy, that's where he evolved from, and that's how he would best relate to what it is that he wanted to convey to the human beings, and overcoming their greediness and their hatefulness and their jealousy and their envy and all that good stuff. Because again, that's something they need to understand. Although their moral ethical value system is parallel to ours, it's not the same. It's different. There's nothing right or wrong about it. It's just if you can live by that, then hey, you'd live like Jesus. But one of the things people don't understand about Christianity, if they refer to themselves as Christians, it only goes back so far. And then, because it was created by humans, and then to us indigenous people, if you think about it, our understanding of our well-being and our existence here goes from the beginning of time. We have stories of origin that right from the beginning of time. And so soon as the earth was created and then the humans were created, then that's where our belief system goes to. And it had nothing to do with a man that created us, had everything to do with the spiritual energy that found a need for us to understand who and what we were in a good way, and convey that, and kind of just live like that, exemplify that, and that's why we live by so much. They say in our language, "La chowicho kante kligano, la chowicho kante chiada," and what that means is it's hard to be an Indian, but I love my Indian ways. And you can also say it's hard to be a human being, but I love my human being ways, just to be inclusive in that statement. But the old folks that shared those type of words for us, that's what they were wishing to convey. And I can share a story where this one old man, he was talking at a conference, and one of the things he shared, he said, "Lakota he macha tokehia, lakota wa macha tokehia." And there was all kinds of people in there, Indians, blacks, all that good stuff. And then the old man said, "What I said in my language was, you're all Indians first, and I'm an Indian first." And that created somewhat of a confusion for the people that were attending the conference, that were not recognizing with Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, or whatever the case may be. And they come and ask me, "Well, what did he mean?" I said, what he was really saying was, you're all human beings first, and I'm a human being first. So that kind of cleared it up for them. That helped them to understand, as a common man that doesn't feel that we have dominion over anything, but we need to understand our purpose and our dedication in life. Then you can go forward and walk in a good way, in a respectful manner, as you develop yourself with some sense of strength as it relates to these virtues that you exercise on a daily basis. And so it's kind of like that, eh? It's something that a lot of our people, again, because of this fast-paced world, and they got to keep up with this, they are finally starting to recognize historical trauma, the effects of that learned behavior, and that's why we're now currently addressing the impacts of colonialization. That's not our way. Maybe that's their way, but that's them. Henielo, that's who they are. That's what they do, but that's not our way. And so when we can get back to our decolonized way of life under natural law, our life will become so much better. And it's and not better in a sense where we're richer and materialistic, but better in a sense it'll afford us a more sense of clarity as we prepare ourselves to someday soon go and be with our relatives on the other side, and not fear the mystery of death, and not let anybody control us as it relates to that fear. Make sense, Toshka?
It's pretty deep, man. I love it. It's some good stuff. Um, the one thing that was just keep popping in my head was, that I feel like sometimes it's hard, especially for us young people, to find our purpose. You know, why are we here? Or what are we doing? And we'll jump from one career to the next career to the next career, and just find it difficult to figure out where we belong in this world. Do you have any advice for that, as a being Lakota, being from your ways, what you've learned about finding your purpose?
Why, sure. You know, like in my lifetime, let's see, what was I? First, when I was growing up, I was a big drunk because I liked it, because that's what the and I don't like referring to our non-Indian relatives as the dominant society, but just for the sake of understanding the way we were brought up in that learned behavior, that colonialized perspective, I'll relate to them as the dominant society. Felt that's what we should be. We should be this noble savage that they wanted us to become, and so they incorporated in us. They broke up our family units. They took our young kids, took them away from their parents, took them away from their understanding and the wisdom of their grandparents, broke up the family unit, and then they put us into boarding schools where we lived by bells, and we were told what to do and what not to do, and not to speak our language, not to live our way of life. Our way of life was against the law till 1968 or 1972, possibly, when the Indian Religious Freedom Act came about. And then it became legal for us to enjoy some of these character developments as it relates to the suffering that we do, not for ourselves, but for other people. And in that, to overcome that colonialized thought process is something that's very hard for our young people. That's why I don't mind speaking to these things now in this format, in this manner, to help them understand when they look inwardly and they go beyond this fear, even of themselves, they realize that they don't have to become that noble savage that they want us to become. We don't have to let them make us mascots of who and what they are. Because again, when I was growing up, that's what I initially became, a big drunken Indian that was beating up everybody all the time. And uh, then when I overcame that, I realized my purpose and dedication through prayer, because I was a very devout Catholic for 27 years of my life. The first 27 years of my life, my grandma instilled that Catholicism in my dad instilled it in us kids, and they thought they were doing good for us. And initially, my grandmother spoke nothing but Dakota, and she never taught my dad Dakota. And then my mother spoke nothing but Lakota, because she was from Wood Mountain, where she originally comes from, Cheyenne River Reservation in South Dakota. But she spoke Lakota. And they never taught us that, because they thought they were protecting us so that we can coexist in a white society. They didn't realize how detrimental that would be to us in our well being. And so, from that, through prayer, I asked the Creator, or this higher power, to guide me in this understanding of who and what I was and where I was and why I was. And from that, I got that spiritual understanding. And people didn't understand the humbleness that it took, but it initially came from the Catholic way of the belief and having a faith. Eh? Oh, my dogs are fighting. But it initially based on my faith. In our language, we call it woe chada. And that's what I was referring to when I said our belief system is here since the beginning of time. And that's where it evolved from. But people won't acknowledge that, because their reference is always Christianity. And but we have our own stories of origin. We have our own spiritual way of addressing these things under this protocol that has still been carried on even when it was against the law. And some of those things that had happened, if we can go beyond that and understand the importance of humbling ourselves to this higher power, be it that Wakantanka or whatever you refer to as your higher power, then we'll understand that once we go beyond the fear of ourselves, what we were taught, then we realize that we have a purpose and a dedication, and then they can take the next step into preparing themselves for that um, humbletia. That's a way to do it. Understanding the importance of the guidance and the direction for the.
Oh, we just lost Tommy there from probably some technical difficulties. He'll log back in there, and he's saying some beautiful, awesome words. If any of you guys have questions that you want us to ask him, just put it in the comment box as we wait for him to reappear in the back office here, and we'll bring him back on. But also, we're giving away this High Noon CD. It's a brand new CD for those of you guys who want to be entered. All you got to do is send a little bit of stars. It's a brand new program. Stars they have with Facebook is a way of supporting your favorite creators all over Facebook. If you see it in the comment section, there'll be a little star there, and if you want to be entered to win this, we'll send this out to you, and also throw in a Powwow Times, what do you call that, pop socket. And yeah, so if there's any good questions, and while we're waiting for him, we have this men's fancy versus women's fancy special that Red Deer Aboriginal Dance Troupe is putting on. We got Northern Cree gonna come out and sing, and I think we just got a word of Hal Eagle Tail, who's gonna be the MC and the announcer. So Mr. Rock This Joint is gonna be in the house, and so I'm just gonna message Tommy and making sure that he can get back on. So Jao, say a few words a little bit.
Also, tomorrow for webinar we're having for the Gen 7 program that I'm co-hosting. That's for all the participants at 1:00 Eastern time.
Mm-hmm. So I think maybe his battery might have kicked out on him, so he's gonna come back and charge it. But this idea that he talked about inside out is kind of what ever since I learned that from Uncle Tommy there. I've always made sure that I was able to look at the mirror whenever I had a problem, whenever something was going wrong in my life, to not point a finger and say, it's this person's fault, it's my parents' fault, it's because I never had this, it's because of my environment. I always, first of all, would look in the mirror and ask myself, what is it that I need to improve on? What is it that I need to change? Because I realized if I want things to become better, I have to become better. And if I want things to change, then I have to change. So it's that ability to look within myself and take full responsibility of who I was, and knowing that I had the ability and I had the power to make things okay myself. So and then after that came the journey of reading books, and made the journey of talking to elders, and made the journey of getting wisdom from people. Because I think here's one mistake that I feel like we do is we'll get advice from people who might not have the correct information. For example, if you're trying to get relationship advice from someone who's been divorced 4 or 5 times, and they'll try to give you their advice on how to make it work, that might not be good advice. So what I found out is to look for those elders or role models who are in a position that you kind of admire and want to look at. So like my brother Michael Linklater, who's really excelled in sports and basketball. That's the guy I asked for advice on mindset and working out, because he went at that high level. Hold on one second here. Tommy's calling in to okay, there we go. Hopefully he's able to, maybe there's a new link, but do you get that? So if you want to learn about finances, let's say, then learn from someone who has their kind of their P's and Q's in order, that they're at that level you want to be at, then you ask that. Someone who's really good at spiritual and meditation, get your spiritual advice from that friend, and always look for that person that's in alignment with what you want to look at. So that's kind of the things I think about when he's talking about um, healing from the inside out. So I just got to log in here and send Tommy back the link, because now I just got to remember my password.
His password is
Yeah. So hopefully everyone's doing good out there. I know quarantine has kind of lifted. We're on phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, different towns and cities. So hopefully everybody's staying safe. Out here in Sylvan Lake, uh, it seems like there's no COVID, because so many people are hanging out, and we just kind of stay back a little bit, and
yeah, there is a lot of people out and about right now because it's summertime, nice beach.
all right. So just sending Uncle Tommy the link here for him to rejoin. Here it is. So yeah, and we're just trying to figure out how to keep things moving. So Maria says, I 100% agree. On times in schools won't allow our languages talked. I'm very proud that a lot of families keep heritage and respect for elders keep alive. So another one here is, I've been trying to teach my kids our Indian ways, but how can I get them through them when the competition is YouTube? Absolutely correct, eh? So, Ja, what is your idea on that?
What was the question? What do you guys think about? Oh, I've been trying to get to. So a good way I think would be maybe I don't know. I don't have any good. Can I get through them? So I was fortunate enough to learn my culture from my parents and all my relatives, but not many of us are really fortunate in that way. So if you're trying to learn your culture, it's good to just try find someone who's elders, like you said, like everyone
Oh,
said.
there he is. He's on. And
And we're
Back.
back.
we're back.
Yes, we're back. Now, what was I saying?
Awesome. I know, right? We did have some questions come in though, and it kind of goes along for what you were saying. So Rudy says, I've been trying to teach my kids our Indian ways, but how can I get through to them when my competition is YouTube and technology? I guess we're trying to do it like this, right? Like, hopefully they're watching this on
Yeah,
YouTube.
yeah. And and that's where, like, the way I feel is our young people have a different way of learning now. And like, my kids all grew up watching IT stuff. They're playing games, they learned how to read, and as a result of reading, like all of those games, and they were reading the games and stuff, they learned how to read, and then that really helped them to understand the importance of books, and so they start reading books, and oh man, but it came from those games that they played, eh? And a lot of people,
Mhm.
they don't understand how the this IT perspective really influences our young people today, because they want answers like right now, eh? And
Mhm.
that's the difference between linear teaching, reading, writing, and arithmetic, as it relates to abstract learning, experiential teaching. That's the difference. And once we understand that our way, when we learn about our culture, our value system, our young people and the parents need to kind of help them realize we're depending on them. We're depending on them to learn these things. And from a spiritual perspective, how it used to be a long time ago, and is the grandparents used to take the first child
kind of getting some audio, no audio on your end, Uncle. You're muted yourself there, yeah. But the audio kind of kicked out there. It still says your mic is muted. I could kind of see it on your screen there. Little technical difficulties, everybody. Bear with us. Thank you to everyone who is still on.
Oh, it come back on. Is it all right now?
Yeah, there it is. Perfect.
Okay. Okay, but when the grandparents would take the one child, they would teach them, and then that child was responsible to the rest of the family to kind of convey that. That was the first one. They call it the Chaske or the Winona. The Chaske would be the firstborn boy, and the Winona would be the firstborn girl. And in that, they would share with them this value system, and then those oldest ones of the children would share that with their children, with their siblings. But since that our family unit was broken apart, what happens in a spiritual way, and you'll hear this quite often, is usually there's one individual in each family that kind of just naturally picks up this way of life, eh? And they don't know how and they don't know why. They're not chosen, they're not special, but in a spiritual way, they've just taken on that responsibility to learn about their cultural value system. And it's amazing how that works, and that's how we've maintained it. But once we get that family unit back in place, I believe those things will start coming back, and our young people are starting to understand the importance of that responsibility of who and what we are as a people. And I can only speak to the Dakota, Nakona, and Lakota way of life, and but I'm sure that there's similar uh, aspects about our cultural value system that has been a part of their protocol since the beginning of time. And that's why we're still here. That's why we're such humble people. And the beauty of our way of life is very simple. Actually, a better word is very basic because, again, we're not pursuant in a capitalistic way of materialism. We're pursuant of making relatives and strengthening not only our tiwahe, which is our nuclear family, but our tioshpae, which is representative of our extended family. And so all of these concepts that are happening in a contemporary world, that's what my dad was talking about when he said, don't take your grandpa by the hand and run with him. Sometimes as we look inwardly, we got to understand the importance of that virtue of patience, that virtue of compassion, that virtue of empathy, and how we develop those. And how you develop those is you exercise those pretty much on a daily basis as much as you can for the sake of that holistic strengthening emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. Eh? And so it's a concept that a lot of people you won't hear in Indian education or anything like that because we don't speak about things such as that. Oh man, I just got a message. Coda. But but it's those sorts of things that we have to sometimes just kind of go out by ourselves. And if you want that guidance in that direction, because of our spiritual belief, it's there for you. But you can't be in a hurry. You got to be understanding that at some point in time, that's why I'm really into like critical thinking, uh, um, understanding that this higher power, this spiritual energy, gave each and every one of us a mind that is based on love and all these virtues I spoke about, compassion, generosity, all those things. And we need to develop those in a good way and not be greedy in a sense, but be mindful of we're in this together. We're all in this together. All the two-leggeds, all the four-leggeds, all the plants, all the bugs, we're in this together and we have a responsibility. And now, in a spiritual way, one of our family members usually takes on that responsibility and they don't know why. And so they question themselves and then they begin to fear it because they think it's something that's taking over their spirit, but yet they don't recognize the goodness in that. And the sad thing is, there's, I, I dare say, a lot of our elders, which they refer to as elders, are not really living what they talk. They heard it, or they read it. They don't live it, so they don't have that understanding. See, we're not pursuant of knowledge per se under linear teaching. What we aspire to in the strengthening of ourself is understanding of oneself, going beyond that fear, and then of all of the creation. We try to realize the importance of what our responsibility is, and sometimes spiritually, this higher power will take you and give you that avenue of approach to dealing with this entity that people don't fully understand, so they fear it. In our way of life, there's no ghosts, there's no goblins, there's no devil, there's no negative energy like that. And it's more of an understanding of the goodness that's there, and acknowledging that goodness and bringing that forward. And I say that from a Dakota and Lakota perspective because we're matriarchal. We understand the
Through the
importance
mother.
of the true meaning of life is procreation. And so we revere and hold our women in a very high regard. And in that, we're the protectors and the providers of them. But nobody wants to pursue that anymore because they get caught up in that capitalistic, imperialistic way of life. And so they're trying to aspire to materialism. They're trying to get as much material as they can, much money as they can, much goods as they can. But us, we give it away. And I
Mm-hmm.
think Saskatchewan Indian Gaming Authority is representative of that. They're a business venture. They're a corporation that's supposed to be bringing in money. But yet the rest of the business communities around them get mad at them because they give their money away to all of the reserves in Saskatchewan. They can't understand that. You're supposed to protect your principal. You're supposed to protect your overhead. Keep that and then reinvest it. Well, SIGA has become such a strong corporation. They have the ability to share with all Indians in Saskatchewan. Did you ever realize that? And that's a white man's
Mm-hmm.
perspective. But yet they've taken it and implemented and incorporated this Indian way of life as it relates to generosity. Nobody looks at it like that. Nobody wants to address a corporate structure like that because they think corporations are all greedy. Look at SIGA. They're not. They're Indian. Saskatchewan Indian Gaming Authority. Is that cool or what?
That's so awesome. Which kind of brought up a question that I had was like, how do is that kind of the answer for a person to balance living in this modern world and still figuring out how to maintain and be indigenous?
You know, uh, our pursuit of this natural law or this indigenous way of life is not a monarchy. We don't have a king and a queen and all that sort of thing. What we are common people. We don't have labels addressing us as um, we're better or we're closer to God because we're living the way we're supposed to. It's not like that. We're common people, and when I say common people, it means that we're all the same in that creator's eyes, eh? Nobody's better and nobody's less. And what that represents is that epitome of redemption, that all forgiving, that's classic. And in that, we have no concept of hell. We don't have no concept or understanding of the devil. There's no such thing as that in our belief system. And if you read the Old Testament, this higher power, this creator or this Wakatanka was everything. It states right in there, it says, I'm the Alpha and I'm the Omega. And that means they're everything. And there was no such a thing as hell or the devil or we're going to be condemned to this if you don't do this. And basing their structure on fear. We don't have that. We have no fear. And we live like that. We're not arrogant. We're not hateful people. We're not mean people, but we're people that want to just get along. And we don't aspire to palaces and big cars and stuff like that. Although it's nothing wrong with owning them if you can afford them. But we should never forget. That's why I mentioned Siga. We should never forget how big you get. You should never forget about where you came from, and always give back to that. But not where you deplete your own principle, but and you share enough so that everybody can experience. And they call that for the sake of the greater good. Eh? And so in that process, it's something that people look inwardly. They have a faith. I don't even like to say the word prayer because that's not representative of us going to this creator. We say wachekia, and that has something to do with we're crying, we're humbling ourselves in that process. And you'll see many old men, many old women, when they go to ceremony, they cry. And that's an indication of that humbleness that they're sharing on behalf of their wishes that they have to get help with. And again, that's why I don't like using the word prayer, but I'd rather use the word wachekia. And then when we do talk like that, in my language, we say, Wacha iapi. I'm speaking in a spiritual way. Eh? So it's not necessarily prayer per se, because I feel that that's a contamination of Christianity, and it's kind of crossing over into who and what we are as a people in respects to ekche, wichasha, and that means common people or Indians. Make sense?
Makes sense. Beautiful.
Oh,
You talked about critical thinking. You know, you brought it up. You love the idea of critical thinking. We have a question specifically about that. Go ahead, Joe.
hi Tommy. I'm Jared Whitefish. I'm from Saskatchewan.
Oh,
Um,
wait.
that's a. I was gonna ask to what degree does one have to work on themselves to get to a space of critical thinking?
Well, again, if we look at this commonness and how we're taught, we realize our mind is the same as the creator. You give us the importance of it's not right or wrong, it's the way that I chose to do it. My dad would tell me, my son, I'm going over there. He said, and like if it was snowing, he said, I'm going over there. Don't follow me in my same tracks. He said, because it's hard to follow somebody in their same tracks in the snow, eh? He said, but I'm going to tell you where I'm going. You could find your own way. You may get there before I do, but if you get there before I do, wait for me, he'd say. But in that natural process, we realize the importance of critical thought. There's issues that concern us. Why does it concern us like that? Well, we have to revert back to historical trauma, genetic memory, all of these things that we're living. It's not natural for us to live like that. And so when we're thinking critically, we realize that this is coming from my center. This is coming from the inside of me, which is my heart. Your heart is protected. And then you think like that. So it goes through your mind, these pure thoughts of love and caring and sharing all these good things, and it comes out of your mouth. And if you're taught properly, then you're sharing in a good way without having to defend uh, and have this what they call cognitive dissonance as it relates to your teachings, but you share. Like in teachers, um, when they sit our kids in a school in a classroom setting, a lot of our young people are survivors. They're not manipulators. I'm talking about Indian children now. They're survivors. They're not manipulators. But the teacher, because they can't control the Indian child in that uh, classroom setting, they call them, they're manipulating the system, and they won't do what I told them to do, and they won't sit down and behave. You can't even make your own kids sit down and behave because that's what they do. They enjoy getting involved and they enjoy doing things and being involved. And you got to keep them not necessarily entertained, but involved. And once you quit involving them, making them sit down and behave, it's against our nature as Indian people to do that. The comparison I made to one teacher, I said, "You see this little boy come in here? You were over there and he seen that computer. He wanted to get on that computer and that other kid was on there. So he went over here and he stuck that little kid in the arm with a pencil and you had to go give him attention to that kid. So he went over there, kicked that little kid off the computer, and then he was playing on the computer." And then she got mad at the kid, not because of what he did, but because he outthought her. And in that, she called him a manipulator. I said, not necessarily. I said, he's a survivor. He wanted to play on the computer. You should have recognized that and then made way or helped him understand in time he'd be able to get on there. But instead, he took control of the situation, seeing you were getting all caught up in something else, and he exploited that to the point to where he could get on the computer. I said, let's take one non-Indian little boy sitting at the desk. He got all his pencils and paper all nice and good. He's sitting there just straight. Then you get a little Indian kid sitting next to him, and he's just messing around, moving around, all that good stuff, won't listen, all that good stuff. I said, you take these two young people and you put them in the woods for a week. Which one do you think will come out alive? And she said, Tommy, I never thought of it like that. I said, well, that's the way I see it. And so as we respect our young people and try to respect them from the direction in which they're coming, it's up to us not to be the alleged responsible adult, but be the true responsible adult, especially when you're dealing with children. Eh? You got to
Mm-hmm.
understand that they're affected just like everybody else, but not in the same way. And so that's why, I say we cannot pan-Indianism this way of life and let people believe or think that we're uh, um, all the same because we're not. And that's reflected in our kids. That's reflected in the way our children have their own personality. And what that represents is that ability to be a critical thinker. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question, or is that too kind of far out there for you?
I thought it was awesome. Did it get you? Was it answered for you, Joe?
Yeah, it was.
That's so cool. You talked a little bit about children, and I know when we had our conversation, you talked about why in the Lakota way, like you don't hit your children. Can you kind of tell that little bit of story of why that is?
Why, sure. Like in our language, we refer to our children as wakayajat. In other words, like they're standing with all this spiritual energy because we believe they just came from that spiritual energy. And in that, if you're going to hit and beat your child and spare the rod and lose the child attitude, then is that the way you treat your God? Is that the way you treat the spiritual energy? I think not. So, you know, I always help people understand my children, and I have 7 of them, have never been hit or even hollered at by me. And people don't understand that. And yet, all of my children are very intelligent, they're very diverse, they're very open minded. Uh, I don't think any of them has ever been in a church yet because they didn't need it, because their mushum and their kukum are the wind, the water, the lightning, all of those things, eh? That's their grandfathers, that's their grandmothers. And so that's the way they believe in a spiritual sense. And from that, they've always, um, one of the things that I always like to mention at this time is my children were all born naturally to a certain degree, and then they were all raised in moss bags. That had a lot to do about their disposition on life, eh? It's something that we taught them, that security that we gave them when they were young and shared that with them and always took care of them, always looked after them. None of my children ever seen me and their mothers ever fight. They've never seen me and their mothers ever drunk or out of our minds. I've been sober without drugs or alcohol for 40 years. But I don't go and tell everybody that, because that's my business. And again, a lot of times people don't understand, when you're in control of all of your faculties all the time, you have that control within you not to hit your children, not to holler at them and take out your own personal problems on them just because you can. In other words, you can treat them as to where they just came from, eh? That spiritual energy. Because again, that's where we're going to go back to when we leave this place, is back to that spiritual energy, which non-Indian people refer to as heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Makes sense. Can you tell us, because we're like on our own journey as men, and kind of going back into our ways, but in a Lakota perspective, Dakota, what were some roles as a boy, into a teenager, into a man? Like, what were the certain roles of, just in the male sense of being a man in the Lakota way?
Well, a lot of these things you have to kind of transfer them to um, a more contemporary perspective as it relates to being fighter and protector. Long ago, um, our young people, our young boys, would really try from when they were about 8 years old all until they're 18. They'd always try to get into the grass dance society. The Grass Dance Society long ago was a society that trained our young people to become the warriors that they wanted to be. And when I say warriors, I don't mean people that make war. I mean people that would pursue peace and live in a peaceful way. That's what a warrior is. And in that, that's where you look inwardly and recognize how much training our young people need as it relates to that holistic approach, emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually, and making their circle a circle. If you go too much spirituality, your circle gets out of round. If you go too much emotional, it goes out of round. So you have to touch base with each four of those little characteristics of maintaining that circle in a good way. And you do that through the teachings that you get. A lot of times, our uncles and our aunties were our teachers. And so we always listen, and we'd always do what our uncles and our aunties uh, uh, told us to do. And in that, their preparation, these young boys would go and seek guidance and direction from their uncle, because they wanted to stay in that grass dance society. And in that grass dance society, what they were the ones that were on the ground. Okay, they were the ones that were uh, the long range reconnaissance patrol, the LERPs. They were the scouts. These guys were the ones that were taught how to go out and be stealthful in their manner for the sake of the greater good, for the sake of the tribe. They'd go out and get information. They couldn't be heard. They couldn't be seen. They couldn't be smelled. They couldn't be detected in any way. If you were a grass dancer and you were part of that society, you were taught how to be stealthful. And some of the challenges were, one of the things was, the old people would sit there and watch these young people that were going through these tests. You'd have to go and touch a badger on the nose. If you know what a badger is, it's a little fierce animal that would tear you up if he catches you. And it was a very hard thing to do, but the discipline it took for these young boys to get over that fear of the badger, to respect that, crawl up to the badger and touch him on the nose and then take off running because he'll catch you. Another challenge that they were presented with was to go and step on a skunk's tail. You know, a lot of people, they don't understand why they would do that, because if you come upon a skunk and it gets excited, it sprays and it's real rank, eh? And if you were a scout and you come up on a skunk and you didn't know how to keep him from spraying, you keep him from spraying by stepping on his tail. Then when the enemy smelt the skunk, they knew something was there. Make sense? You see? And so then when you touch a badger on the nose, you would know, you'd go beyond that fear of the badger. You wouldn't confront him, but you'd learn how to go around him. But that's only after you got over that fear of the the badger itself because it was such a vicious little animal.
Hmm.
But little things like that to help one develop their character in respects to trying to be a scout. And if you understand grass dancers, they always wore the plumes on their hair on the top. And the reason for that is they were never involved in a courageous, brave act to where they could uh, realize a real eagle feather. The real eagle feathers were by the warriors that actually went into battle, counted coup, and had stories told about them, or whatever, stole some horses or stole some women or whatever. They would realize these feathers, and that's what the feathers were all about. But the young grass dancers, they would just have the plumes like on the top of their head.
Hmm.
They never had an opportunity to gain an eagle feather yet. So my uncle would tell me the grass dancers were the ones that were on the ground. The ones with the feathers on, those were earned feathers, and they were the ones on horseback. They were the warriors, eh? You see how that works?
Yeah, holy man.
I don't know if I answered your question,
No,
Monica.
yeah, you did. So I just finished reading Black Elk, and I also finished a Crazy Horse book, and I'm learning a little. That's my kind of way of learning at the moment,
Yeah.
and learn. And it talked a lot about Lakota ways. And one thing that interested me was the shirt wearer and how
Yeah.
Crazy Horse earned that right to be a shirt wearer. But then that's something that I don't know if it stopped or not, but it mentioned in the book that it's no longer practiced. Is that something that you know about being a shirt wearer in some of those roles as a warrior?
Why, sure. You know, like every time in our way of life amongst the Sioux Nation, we have what we call the Ocheti Shakoi. The Ocheti Shakoi was all the tribes when they got together. They would meet, and when they would meet, they would designate four individuals, just four, at that time when they had a meeting, because the meetings were few and far between. And they would designate four warriors that were deserved to become a shirt wearer. And they had to have stories told about them, about their acts of bravery, their acts of kindness, their acts of generosity. All these things, they had to prove that they were a good leader. And then from that, when these stories got back to the Ocheti Shakoi, the seven council fires, then they would designate. They said, "Okay, Sword, you're a shirt carrier. Crazy Horse, you're another shirt carrier. I forget the other two. American Horse, I believe, was another one. And then there was one more. Afraid of his horse or something was the other four shirt carriers that I know of, and they were designated that. And when they became these shirt wearers, they were kind of very dignified warriors because of the stories that were told about them of all of these different characteristics that they carried and they exercised. And in that, when you were a relative, like a woman relative of the shirt wearer, you would cut a piece of your hair off and go hang it on his shirt. And the misinterpretation of that was people thought those were scalps. Those weren't scalps on that shirt wearer's shirt. Those were uh, honorings from the women in his family, in his Tioshpai, in his Tiwahe, to where they were honoring him, and they would cut a piece of their hair off and wrap it up and then tie it and then hang it off his shirt, and he'd have all this hair on his shirt that would come from the ladies in his family because they wanted to honor him like that. And so the story that I understand about Crazy Horse is he became a shirt wearer at one of the last Ocheti Shakoi meetings, and they give him that shirt. Well, he took his shirt and he said, I'm not deserving of it. I don't really want it," but they made him wear it. And then as time went on, of course, him being a young man, he went and stole somebody's wife, and he gave that gave that shirt back because it wasn't a very dignified, honorable thing for him as a shirt wearer to steal this gentleman's wife. Her name was Black Shawl, and I forget what that guy's name was, but Crazy Horse got shot in the face with a gun because of that action, and eventually the lady went back to her husband. But Crazy Horse return that shirt that they bestowed upon him because of that undignified act that he went through, just based on his own emotions, eh?
Yeah.
Kind of overcoming. But that's kind of basically what I understand about the shirt wearers, eh? They were very, very strong warriors, and
Hmm.
again, horse, sword, American horse, and afraid of his horse, I think, were the last four that were designated. I remember I was asking when the Ocheti Shakoi got together down in Fort Yates under that no dapple. I went down there to I took my pipe and stuff, and I was ready to kind of have a meeting with the spiritual leaders. But by the time I got there, they disbanded for whatever reason. They were fighting over money, not the spiritual leaders, but the other people. They were worried about money and stuff like that, so they disbanded. And Virgil wasn't there, so I couldn't talk to him. But I always thought that when Ocheti Shakoi had that meeting, they should have designated four shirt wearers in our culture. And that's one thing that they didn't do. They didn't take advantage of that opportunity, because that was one of the Ocheti Shakoi's responsibilities. I felt that, but I couldn't tell nobody that. But I always felt that, geez, they should have designated four highly uh, respected individuals as the current shirt wearers, eh? Because it still can happen if the Ocheti Shakoi ever meet again, eh? They can designate that, and I
Yeah.
think they should.
That's what I was wondering about, like those old ways that are not um out there, to bring them back, right? When I was reading about some of the Lakota, they talk about dreams of thunder being a really spiritual thing. Is that still something that people talk about when they dream about thunder beings?
Oh, for sure. There's a society that it's kind of the Thunder Beings work with, eh? They the Heoka Gichi Wankeo Yateki, they work together, eh? That's what that means. And the Heoka, it's the clown of our culture. They're the clowns, the Heoka. They do everything backwards, and the ones that they work with, the ones that help them, the ones that are the friends, are the Thunder Beans. And but before they can go into that society, they have had to have a dream about the Thunder Bean, or if they sit on a hill when they're fasting and the Thunder Beans come and visit them, eh? And oh man, I tell you, that's not something you would want to wish for. And in that process of living like that, a lot of people don't understand that they have to live, of course, their first natural thought process is backwards, but they also have to turn that around and think uh, the natural way. And so they have to live this life in two ways, respecting both ways. So this higher power, or this Wakatanka, has a double opportunity to get the respect from a true Heoka. But currently in contemporary times, if you haven't had that dream, or the Thunder Beans haven't visited you, or when you're on the hill or anything like that, then um, a lot of them hide behind that, because they want to go get drunk and chase women and steal and do drugs, and then they say, I'm Heoka, I could do that. Well, that's not what it's all about. It's about doing things in a non-natural way. If you ever seen a Heoka when they dance, they dress up to appear as a spirit, but when they dance, they act human. So they do stupid stuff, eh?
Hmm.
And that's the responsibility of that society. And in that, people don't understand that. Now they're starting to mock them and make fun of them, because people have deteriorated that whole respectful concept about being visited by. It's a very fearful thing to be visited by the Wakia when you're on Hamblecha, or in a dream. It's something that it's mind altering, and it'll change you just like that, to give you understanding of that. They're not powerful, but yet they have the ability to educate, heal, and change the weather. Hey.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Beautiful. Kind of step back here before we kind of bring this in for a landing. We had some questions that I really wanted to get out, but this one kind
Sure.
of goes along. This one kind of goes along with some of the work that I've been doing. So a big work around Andrew McLeod says this. A big word around my workplace is reconciliation. What does that mean to you, or is that word that doesn't work in our modern environment? What word would you replace that with if the word reconciliation doesn't work?
Hmm. You know, to reconcile something is to bring it back, eh? To to
Mm-hmm.
to bring it together, I guess is a good word. Reconciliation is to bring us together and make a better world for our children. That's the way we live anyway. That's not our problem. That evidently is their problem. And what they're trying to help us reconcile to is their way of life. They need to acknowledge our way of life under natural law and our value system to afford us an avenue to reconcile. And if they don't acknowledge us as human beings, then how are they going to even reconcile us? They feel, that there's something that I was waiting for some of these lawyers to really address when one of our Indian people gets killed. Like down here in the United States, we're under the Department of Interior, which used to be the Department of War. And in that, our status is such that we're considered wards of the government. The same thing like the spotted owl, the wolves, the bears that are endangered. That's the same thing we're falling under. You can kill a bear, you can kill a wolf, you can kill an owl, but you can't murder them. And so think about that. How does that apply to Indians then? I'm waiting for some lawyer to take that perspective and say, well, this guy didn't murder that Indian because he can't murder him. Because again, he's not a human being. They look at us like that. When you talk about reconciliation, let's reconcile and start looking at us as human beings, as somebody that is the keepers of this earth. You want to talk about reconciliation? Start acknowledging our value system that's based on protocol and natural law. Then we can reconcile. What they want to reconcile is us to go more towards the simulation perspective. All you savages got to come to our way of thinking. No, we don't. And look at how they control. Even when we're hunting for spiritual ceremony, they try to throw you in jail. Even when you got to go off your reserve to go and get something that you're needed, a plant, an animal, or something for medicine, they'll arrest you. And how come they do that? Because you're Indian. But yet they don't look at what our needs are. They don't. If they want to reconcile, why don't they look at our needs from our perspective, not theirs? And they think just because we're not like them that we're wrong. We're not wrong. They should start thinking like us, and then we can reconcile. And that reconciliation would, the first thing we would do is protect our first medicine, the water. Hey.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
that's what reconciliation means to me. And some of these things that people don't understand or don't want to acknowledge because of their cognitive dissonance, they defend. It's like this Stockholm syndrome. Our people have been so assimilated, they'll defend the oppressor's way of life. The best tool of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. Think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Nephew, you
Wow.
need to read a little bit more about John Trudell. That guy, he was way before his time as it relates to some of these questions you have. If you can find anything with John Trudell in it, you should read a book or something like that. And then he'll get you. The reason I say that, because, again, he understood about the oppression, the historical trauma, all of these things, the racism that was going on. But from a natural law perspective, he would relate to the people what we need to do as it relates to, if this is, he would say stuff like, if this is civilization, then I'm not civilized. Hey, if this is what your term civilization represents, where you go and kill men and women and babies just for the sake of imperialism, then I don't want to be civilized. He would say stuff like that, and nobody would listen to him. But he was a very, very informed individual, and he was dealing with AIM and all that good stuff. And I don't think that people really understood. I think the FBI and the CIA were really afraid of John Trudell, even more so than Russell and Dennis. Eh? Russell
Hmm.
used to be my good buddy.
Oh, really? That's so cool. So that's John Trudell, Trudel.
Yeah, I think it's
Okay,
Trudell.
cool.
I think I did a blog post on him.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna look them up and definitely read. One thing I do is I work with a lot of non-indigenous schools, and the big thing is they want to bring indigenous education to classrooms, and they feel like they can't get started because they don't know where to begin, and they talk about this idea of foundational knowledge. Can you explain in a Lakota way what foundational knowledge might mean to you for a person wanting to learn kind of indigenous ways of thinking?
Well, foundational knowledge really doesn't apply because
Mm-hmm.
it's more based on an understanding of these things. Remember, I said we don't aspire to knowledge as much as we do, and but in a contemporary way, one of the and you know Donnie, right? Spidell.
Oh yeah,
He
for sure.
he's been working on that, and like Chris with his decolonization, but Donnie actually has been doing that, and people, that 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 way in which he works with our kids and incorporates all these good things, these virtues that I talk about, without imposing or infringing on their right to exist, but based on the needs of the children and what they want, he instills that. But see, that's the Lakota way of life. And so it's not so much an imposition or a learned thing that you want to acquire knowledge of, it's an understanding through your experiential teaching. He affords them an opportunity to go into a sweat lodge, to go sit on a hill and fast, to participate in dancing, whatever, because we're totally inclusive. But yet they have to understand their place in our culture, eh? They can't take over. They can't come in and do the ceremonies. They got to be of Indian blood, but we're not excluding them. We wish to include them, and they have a right to participate in these things. But yet, they want to know about this, know about that. Well, I can't tell you anything knowledgeable, but I can help you understand the importance of your critical thought as you look inwardly and wish to overcome this fear that's been instilled in you, to help you realize that, hey, you have just as much right to freedom of spirit as anybody, as it relates to preparing yourself to go and someday soon to go to your heaven, you see. And so in that process, um, people get so caught up on policy and procedure and uh, what do they call it? I call it regulatory authority. Well, we could do this, but we can't because of policy, and that's why I mentioned Donnie's name, because again, he's worked through all that, but nobody's going to ask him how he did it. And once he shows them the way, they set up a policy or a procedure how they can't and why they can't incorporate it into their school, because they think we're infringing or imposing on this young child's right to exist, and that's not what we do. We're not evangelizing about our way. We're just wishing to share, eh?
That's
Does
that's
that make sense?
no, that's so sweet, man. That's awesome. And I've been able to talk with Donnie about it a lot because we kind of have the same roles, but he's in Saskatchewan and I'm in Alberta here. So
Yeah.
he's a big mentor of mine, and I always kind of pick his brain as well. How do you decolonize like a person who wants to be more decolonized? What does that mean, and how does one do it?
Well, I don't want to decolonize because I golf. Hey, that's a joke.
Yeah.
No, again, it goes back to what my dad said. You can go over there, my boy. He would say, you can go over there. You can keep up with them guys. You can go fast. You can go get a nice car, get a nice house, get food for your family, pay your bills, be responsible, but don't forget where you come from. He said, come back over here. Slow down when you come over here. It'll help you get rid of that stress that you're carrying because you're hustling with those people over there where you have to exist according to a standard that is totally alien to you. You see? And so,
Mm-hmm.
in that process, we have to within ourselves understand that. I said something one time, and I've mentioned this quite often. I said, where do you hide your Indian when you're trying to act white? That's not a racist statement. That's a statement of understanding, eh? Why
Yeah.
should I have to compromise my own identity just to feel a sense of belonging to them? And then when it goes back to reconciliation, I don't have to reconcile with them. They need to reconcile with me. And if they can respect the way that I am without calling me a racist or a bigot or a neophyte Indian that's full of feathers and beads and all this good stuff, then hey, there's something wrong with this program. But yet I could keep up with them with their systematic, in spite of their systematic racism. I can still do what they want to do and make a good life for my people, and still represent. You see what I'm saying? And we don't have to compromise our identity just to go over there and do what they do, and sometimes, and in most cases, do it better than them. Then the systematic racism comes into being and they kick your ass out because you're a savage.
So, in a way, it's kind of like walking on a rope balance of both.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to be. You see, it doesn't have to be. Once you got it in your own mind to understand, well, I'm going to go over here. I don't have to, like me, I wear braids and great beaded belt buckles. I let them know I'm Indian. And
Mm-hmm.
in that process, I don't have to compromise. If they want to think I'm racist, that's not my problem. That's theirs. Because if you believe under natural law in this way of belief, there's no avenue for racism to exist because we're totally inclusive. You see? But yet
Mm-hmm.
they call us racist because they are. And that racism, that the way they try to pursue it is based on lack of understanding of who we are. Eh? So when I
Mm-hmm.
go in the white man's world, I always let them know, yeah, I'm an Indian. I speak my language. I live my culture and all that. And if you want me around, fine. If you don't, then hey, that's fine too. I'll go somewhere else and do something else to where I feel comfortable as well. Eh? And that's why I'm a res Indian. People don't understand why I live on the res when I have all this potential. Tommy, you could have done this. I could have done a lot of things, but I would have been missing my relatives. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to miss them. I want to stay close to them. And that's why a lot of our parents keep their children. I keep my kids till they're 50 years old, or as long as I'm alive, my kids are going to be with me. Eh? And that's the way we believe because it's that family structure that we're caught up in. And now, if you think because of this COVID thing, all of these children they have to move back in with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
It's just natural, eh? But yet we don't kick our children out. I would never want to kick any of my kids out because that's the way I was brought up, eh? My
Mm-hmm.
dad brought me up like that, and he never ever kicked us out for whatever and how ignorant we were, how drunk we got, all these drugs we were selling. He never kicked us out or never condemned us. He always welcomed us back in, made sure we had a roof over our head, make sure we had something to eat, and make sure that we were nice to our pet.
Nice. I like what you say some when you were talking about racism. When we talked before, you said, "I'm not racist. I'm pro-indigenous." Can
Yeah,
you
there
kind of
you
okay,
go.
Can you kind of explain that little statement there a little bit?
You know, like even like, well, it all precipitated from when I was on the tribal council, and uh, because of social media, uh, uh, and of course, a lot of my support had passed away because a lot of the support that I received in those 18 years that I sat on the tribal council was the old people, and in that they all passed away. And then from that, because there was no really dignity or honor in the manner in which they went forward in a with a political agenda, they couldn't maintain any integrity. And so from that, they start calling me a racist. My own Indian people called me that because all I did was go to ceremony, powwows, and represented our people in such an honorable way. And so they attacked me and they told me I was racist. They even called me a devil worshiper in the council chambers where I was a part of. And because I didn't say anything back to them, they thought I was afraid. I wasn't afraid. I was being respectful to them, and then they misconstrued that as uh, that I didn't have anything to say. I had lots to say, but I wouldn't be disrespectful to them because I don't get in mud fight with pigs because pigs like it, eh? And so in that, I had to tell them that I'm not racist. I'm just pro-Indian, and what I meant by that was that's how I live. My paycheck I get every 2 weeks. I worked for like 7 or 8 families because that wasn't my money, that was theirs, and I didn't have a problem in sharing it. When I was dancing powwow and as a professional dancer, um, you can't get rich on powwow. You can ask any champion that is out there. When you go to powwows, we're all a big family. People have tough times. They need a little help to get to the next one. We'd always help them. There's no way we'd be greedy and just keep all that money ourselves. After the powwow's over, we'd pass out $20 bill here, 50 there, 100 there, whatever the case may be. Oh, I'll pay you back. Shit, if they paid me back all the money they owed me, I'd be a very rich man today. But no, that wasn't why I lent it, or that wasn't why I gave it. It wasn't because on conditions. It was based on my ability to exercise my generosity. Okay? And they didn't
Hmm.
see that. That's why I was sharing because they afforded me an opportunity to be generous. That's the way I was brought up because we
Hmm.
were brought up very poor. We didn't have anything. And so we depended on the generosity of others. And when we had something, well, we go hunting and we kill a deer. We'd always share the meat, eh? We'd
Hmm.
get something, a new car. My dad would get a car, not a new one, but a car. He'd always give other people rides and stuff like that because we were brought up very poor. And so in that, that was just to us being Indians. But now they call me racist because I continue to live that way, and they think I'm this neophyte Joe Indian guy that is hates white people. I'm part white.
Yeah. Uh, can I ask you, what is some of the biggest things you learned from your grandparents?
You know, I never had an opportunity to really know my grandparents. My mother's dad was George LeCain and Adele Boxer. They were from Wood Mountain, Saskatchewan, so I only got to visit with them a few times. But one of the
Hmm.
stories my grandfather George LeCain shared with me, he said he had a grandfather that was very old, and he said one time he had a vision, not a dream. He had a vision of a medicine man blowing through this big old horn, and he was out of the end of that horn was coming all this smoke, and when all that smoke lit up, just the Indians were standing. And I said, "Oh wow, cool." That's one of the stories my grandpa told me, and of course, throughout the time, there's a lot of family history that was shared with us from Wood Mountain, Saskatchewan, where Sitting Bull was in regards to our relationship with Sitting Bull, eh? And so we got a lot of family stories about that. But my grandmother on my dad's side, she was a lady that was involved in Carlisle School where they indoctrinated her and she still continued to speak her language. She was into Catholicism because that's what they forced her to do, and she was trying to protect us from not talking our language or going to ceremony or anything like that because it was against the law when she was alive. But one of the things that she did have was she had an oil well, and my grandmother was quite rich, but we were very poor. But because she passed away, and then all that money was uh, spread out amongst all of her children, so we didn't get much. But anyway, um, I never really had that much involvement from my grandparents, other than stories that I heard from my dads and from my mother. So just basically that.
All right, so we're getting into the second hour, which is awesome, and thanks for being with us, everybody who's still on. We are called Powwow Times, so it wouldn't be fitting to have a world champion dancer here and not talk a little bit about powwow. What are some of your favorite powwow stories that you have for yourself?
Well, you know, a lot of those favorite powwow stories I can't tell in public.
Okay. Yeah.
But no, there's a, you know, like on one time, I'll tell you, share this one in Prince Albert. Me and my brother used to go up there when they used to have it outside. It wasn't sponsored by Northern Lights Casino, and that's when Prince Albert was really racist. It was really bad, and so they had the powwow down outside somewhere, and we was at that powwow, and then they had supper break. So me and my brother shoots arrow. We walked up to the local KFC, and so we're standing in line. But we only took half of our regalia off. I took off my roach. I left my paint on and had my ribbon shirt on, and I had my leggings and my bells and my side drops on, and so did he. So we walk into this KFC real quiet, and there was a big line of Indians in there, eh? And so we stand there waiting our turn, and he goes up to the waitress in there. She was behind the counter, and he looks at her, and she was kind of looking at him, kind of scared, like, because he was all painted up. And he said, "Hey, do you serve Indians in here?" And she said, "Yes, yes, sir, we do. I'm part Indian. Yes, we serve Indians in here." He said, "Well, give me one extra crispy with lots of gravy on it."
Yeah.
True story, true story. All the Indians in there bust out laughing. He said, "Oh man!" And then she said, "Oh darn you!" She was trying to hit my brother,
Yeah.
but he's through it. But you know, there's stuff like that. And then, like when Northern Lights Casino started out, I was involved with them from the beginning. We used to have meetings to where everybody understood their role in that powwow committee. And so I used to go up there, and Richard used to invite me up and take care of me while I was there, of course. And then so we'd have the powwow meetings, and I explain each position to them, eh, and help. And it's
Mhm.
still going to this day. That was from when they first started as Northern Lights Casino Powwow. Same thing with Dakota Dunes. Gary got me involved with that, eh. So
Mhm.
we hooked them up kind of similar way, and they used to call me and Howie the Sega twins.
Nice. One story that if it's okay for you to share, is why do we bring the Eagle staff in first at a powwow?
Well, you know, to us, um, the way I understand it, that's our flag, eh? That
Mm-hmm.
and the other flags that come in behind it, they're just in support. So what that Eagle staff represents is our culture, our value system, our way of life, and who we are as Indigenous people, not Sioux, not Cree, not but Indigenous people. Because again, as you can see, all of those things on that Eagle staff are all they're all natural products, if you will. Feathers from the bird, hide from the buffalo, you know, stick from the wood. They're representative of all those things, and that represents our value system. At one time, that stick, that eagle staff that they see used to be straight. It was a spear, and that represented war. Okay, but when they decided that, okay, we're going to live our life in a good way, we're not going to start or war or anything like that, they bent that spear over so that it's crooked on top, and that represents peace, you see. And so now it's bent representative of we're a very peaceful people. So that's kind of kind of why the eagle staff comes in first, because that's who we are and what we are. It makes me feel bad because I've been to powwows where they don't have an eagle staff, eh? But that's their
Mm-hmm.
way. And I said, well, that's, and then they just bring in the flags. And I said, why are you even bringing in the flags if you're not bringing in the eagle staff? But the flags
Yeah.
just represent our veterans, which we hold in high regard. So we don't want to be disrespectful to our veterans, because that's how powwow started. That's the origin of powwow. Eh?
Yeah. When they came back from war and stuff. Yeah, that's so sweet. I always thought that was a real cool story when you told me that, and then now I always pay attention to that eagle staff. You know, when I'm lined up, that's so cool.
Ah.
So a lot of Indigenous students graduated this year, and they didn't get to celebrate their graduations because of COVID. They're staying home. But what advice would you give some of the graduates, Indigenous graduates, who are about to enter the so-called real world of capitalism and all that? Like, what kind of advice would you give them?
Don't be afraid to be who you are. That's the main
Hmm.
thing, eh? And in that,
Hmm.
as you go forward, if you speak your language, hey, use it or for whatever. Tanse tayo, boy.
Hmm.
Tante tutenekwa. Where are you going? Get over here and get to work. That's bad, eh? But yeah, they shouldn't be afraid to let people know I'm an Indian. And if they're hired there because they're fooling the people that hired them that they're not Indians, then that's wrong. But
Hmm.
be spirited, be understanding and respectful all that you do, because you don't only represent yourself, you represent your family, your tribe, and all of these Indian people that are there. Because in that, a lot of times, and I continue and consistently try to help people understand, especially our young people, is as you represent, always do it in a respectful way. Don't talk bad to anybody or about anybody, and in a good way. It tells the people who we are. We're Dakota, we're Lakota, we're Nakota, all that good stuff, eh? And in that process, like in my language, we call the Cree Shahia, and the reason for that is because they painted their face red, eh? And that's what that represented, is that Shahia. That's what that means. You paint yourself red. And same way with the Cheyennes, we call them Shahiala, and that's because they painted their face red too. But there's a difference there, and so a lot of the stuff that we do, our biggest teacher is based on observation, and our language, and when we share it, is very descriptive as it relates to what we saw. And so, as they go out and they want to continue to pursue any particular profession, always be mindful how that good teacher of observation is. See how people are, see what they want to do, see how they want it done. Listen to how things get done, and you'll get better. But don't ever be afraid. Don't ever put yourself down in respects to your identity, because in order for you to get across that water, you couldn't, you shouldn't have ever denied who you were. Eh? My father had a dream about that, and I shared that one time to help people understand the importance of looking inwardly and being able to identify with yourself. So as these young people go out there in a contemporary way, is to be real, be yourself, be who you are. Even though it's a limited amount, never be afraid to show your culture and your value system, and try to live by it. It's very hard. It's hard to be an Indian, but I love my Indian ways, and we're not afraid to express that. Nor is there a place just to express that. No, we express that all the time, 24/7, 365 days a year. Even when I'm golfing, they know I'm Indian.
That's so cool, man. Yeah, man, that my cup is full right now, man, overflowing with some really good stuff. I wrote so much notes from our conversation now. Hopefully everybody out there was writing down everything that was good to you, or keeping it with you, and that you could share with your kids and your families. But Tommy, just want to say thank you so much. Is there any last words you want to make sure that you say, that you want to leave with people? I know you said a lot that was really good, but is there anything that maybe we didn't ask you that you wanted to say today?
No, I just want to reiterate that this our as it relates to our cultural value system, it needs we need to recognize the diversity and the uniqueness that should become an enhancement and an enrichment for the sake of the growth of our children. I say that wherever I go, I try to help people understand that. And again, uh, we need to realize the difference that exists there as it relates to that dogmatic doctrine that they live by, that they call the Bible. It's not wrong because it works for them, evidently, but we have our own way that does represent that diversity, that does address that uniqueness through our language, our culture, and our ceremony, that should be an enrichment and enhancement for the sake of the growth of our future, which is represented by our children. And if we make ourselves strong, again, we'll be able to give that clarity about who and what we are, not only to our own, but to all of the people, so that they can realize that diversity is live and well in 2020 and 21, 20 forever. We're always going to be here. We're not special, we're not chosen, but we're different. And in that, once we acknowledge that difference and understand our system, then we can begin that road to reconciliation. If they want to reconcile, they need to acknowledge who and what we are as a people in respects to our indigenous perspective on how we live our life under that value system we call natural law. Eh? And I just leave that with y'all, and hopefully it all works good. My dogs are fighting over my attention.
Yeah. Yeah, Tommy, that was awesome. I want to say, Sagitin, I love you. Thank you so much for
Oh,
taking some
Oh,
time out of your. I know you kind of. I don't know if you cut your golf game a little short today so you could be with us and rush back home. But thank you for that. For
we
spending
took
some of
30
your time.
days, so I just
Oh, nice.
we up and I knew I was going to be right on 8 o'clock or just a little after, but
Yeah.
I was, but we did good. We had fun. It was enjoyable. Tough enough to wear pink, so I wore two shirts because that's how tough I am. Hey,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. So stay on a little bit, Tommy. I'm gonna end this thing, but we could talk just a little bit before I let you go.
Okay.
I'm gonna take you off and say goodbye to all the viewers as well. So stay on for a little bit. Don't hang up yet. Everybody that's out there, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much. We had a supporter who sent some stars. That was Chrissy Mesa Wistawal. Hopefully I said that right. But because you supported today's show, we're gonna send you a high noon CD. So if you wanna give us your address, just message us on Facebook. We're gonna send this out to you and mail that out. Thanks for being a supporter of this episode, and hope if you guys like this episode, make sure that you like, comment, share with all the people that you know, and share it on your social media, on your YouTube, on your Snapchat and TikToks, or wherever it is you share your content. Make sure you get it out there, because this is awesome good word. So for those of you guys who stayed, we were on for 2 hours, so thank you so much for your time, spending your time with us. I know that there's a million other things you could have been doing right now, but you're here with us, so we want to say thank you guys so much for being a part of today's show. So I want to say Toksha, and Sagitin, and thank you so much for
hi,
being
hi.
here today. All right, see you guys later.